Hi everyone, my name is Maria Carolina Porcino, and with Kyria Rebecca Fernardi, we are going to present a study called Globalization and Internationalization in ELT, Methodology, Technology and Language Policy at a Crossroad in Brazil. We are part of the postgraduate program Linguistics at the Federal University of Espírito Santo, Brazil. And this study aims at reflecting the impact of globalization and internationalization in education in general and in the English language teaching in particular.
Globalization contributed to the emergence of the information society and knowledge economy, which in turn contributed to the internationalization of higher education, which is defined as the process of integrating international, intercultural, or global dimension in the mission, function, or proposal of a higher education institution. And this, in turn reflects the effects of globalization. In this scenario, universities are viewed as valuable assets for their intellectual capital, which is now seen as an import and export product in the knowledge economy. Another effect of globalization is related to the technological advances, especially with regard to new information and communication technologies, hereafter ICTs, which enabled a more democratic and inexpensive flow of information, products, and services, which in a globalized economy means millions of users and people connected to mobile devices, internet, and social networks. This new flow of information and the affordances of ICTs changed the way we express ourselves in the new global and local scenario, both virtually and in person. ICTs also changed the way we produce and acquire information and knowledge, as shown, for example, by the number of massive online open courses offered with and without certification by world-class university. Autonomy in learning is considered a characteristic of postmodern education, and we can say that the internet has given more access to information, whereas social networks, for example, have given more voice to the thousands of people in the information era. And both internet and social networks brought more autonomy in the search not only for information, but also for expression channels. The number of people who exercise this autonomy in pursuit of knowledge through massive online courses, for example, and their voice in pursuit of information through Facebook is evidence of this new way of relating to and with the world, with the internet and globalization. The changes in society and in the forms we communicate and produce knowledge do not always reach schools and universities with the same speed they reach homes, though they probably reach higher education faster than schools due to the university intellectual capital appeal in the knowledge economy. The internationalization of higher education affects and is affected by globalization, and the status of and use of English as a foreign, international, or academic language. Fernardi and Ortiz, for example, analyzed the internationalization process of two Brazilian universities with different backgrounds and motivations to go international. They concluded that the greatest obstacle for the internationalization of higher education in both universities investigated is the low level of English proficiency that prevents both academic mobility out and in. Pinheiro and Fernardi analyzed Brazilian internationalization policies enacted in the Science Without Borders and English Without Borders program. The Science Without Borders program can be described as a program of academic mobility out, and the reason for its low uptake of grants offered by this program was mainly due to the lack of English proficiency of Brazilian candidates. In order to fill in this gap identified in the internationalization of higher education process in Brazil, the government launched in 2012 the English Without Borders program, whose goal was to correct a historical deficiency in English language in teaching English as a foreign language in that country. Pinheiro and Finardi concluded that a greater investment in English language teaching and learning, both in basic education and in higher education, is needed to drive internationalization in Brazil. Finardi, Prebianca, and Mom argue that in the current information society, both English as an international language and digital literacy are passports to information access and social inclusion, as well as for capital formation, which can be defined as the ability of individuals to generate benefits by means of their personal relationships or social practices. Despite these changes in society and the role of English and technology in it, there are barriers that seem to resist the effects of globalization, as for example in the case of resistance to include ICTs in education, as shown by Finardi and Teixeira, who analyzed teacher training course for the use of ICTs in traditional classes. They concluded that the greatest obstacle for the use of ICTs in classrooms in Brazil is not related to the limited access to equipment, since universities and schools are in general well equipped, but rather they conclude that the obstacle is related to the broad access to ICTs, to use the equipment and technologies critically to generate benefits for the users and their environments through this use. In this sense, we agree with them who conclude that there needs to be more investment and effort in English teacher training and education for the critical use of ICTs for a 21st century aligned education. Regarding the role of technology in the education, we can say that today, more than ever, technologies not only act as pedagogical support, but change the very concept of teaching and education. The historical development of language teaching, particularly the teaching of English as a foreign language, is inseparable from the trajectory of uses of technology for educational purpose. The different language policies and technologies used with different teaching methodologies in diachronic and synchronic ways served different purposes and objectives in Brazil. Yet, the analysis of language policies, technologies, and methodologies in this study suggests that globalization and the advent of Internet changed the way we teach, learn, view, and use English in Brazil. It seems that technology is no longer a mere supporting tool for teaching and learning, and that English is no mere a foreign language in this gradually more globalized and international scenario in Brazil. The English teaching evolution throughout history seemed to sum up a cyclical succession of approaches and methods that sometimes oppose and sometimes complement each other. It's like a sequence of theses and antitheses without reaching a synthesis, as stated by Leffa 1988. The practice of this synthesis, however, seem to be driven nowadays by the post-method conceptions, which argue that any method alone is capable to explain the complexity of language learning, suggesting therefore that we should work in a context of methodological hybridity that meets the learner's needs during the process of language teaching and learning. Here is a summary of the main methods and approaches used to teach English. The first one is the grammar translation method, which focus is in the reading ability. The technologies used by this method were the blackboard as a support and the literary books as key elements, since the focus was reading. The direct method focused in the oral skills, and it used pictures and posters as visual aids, since in this method was not possible to use any other language than the target language. The reading approach has a focus in the reading ability again, and now didactic books were essential tools. The other lingual method had a focus in the oral skill, especially in the pronunciation. So they used audio players, recorders, overhead projectors, computers in what they call the behaviorist call. What we had was that the technologies worked as protagonists, and sometimes they substitute the relationships learner-learner and teacher-learner. So there was a relationship learner technology. In the communicate approach, the focus is in the communicative competence. And what we see as technology being used by this approach are the computers, the internet, the mobile devices. And here what we have is that learners' autonomy is being developed. And these technologies serve as a source of information and a mean of communication or a channel of expression. In conclusion, we can say that as a consequence of the globalization and internationalization processes and the ICT advances, we need more critical methodologies in language teaching. Methodologies like the content-language integrated learning and the task-based approach that allow us to work more integrated with the technologies and work the language in a more critical way. Because the most important is to deal with technologies and methodologies in a critical way. Mainly because technologies represent a new concept of using and learning a language, and so a new concept of teaching, of education. And now, here to conclude, we reaffirm English and technology as key languages to promote inclusion, citizenship, participation, and development in the globalized world.